If you haven't hello everyone. Welcome. If you haven't already, please feel free to share your scoop in the chat. I'm especially curious about your quests, no judgment, but they're always fun to read what people are questing for these days. I'm Madeline Stanionis. I'm a partner here at M&R, and I'll be your host today for our super fun and super interesting and I hope really helpful webinar. We're going to start with some basics about what ScoutQuest is, how it works, and then we're going to dig into some of the exciting new features that we've rolled out with this next round. And we're also going to see what one rad organization has managed to achieve with their ScoutQuest data. And we will also have time for Q&A. But if you have Q&A during the presentation and during the webinar, you can use the Q&A feature on Zoom, which could be at the bottom of your screen or perhaps the top of your screen. It's got the little Q&A talk buttons. Those questions go to just the host and the panelists. We'll elevate some of those in the chat or in the question and answer section as well, but we'll do our best to answer them. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Jonathan Benton, a senior vice president here at M&R, who is sort of the brains behind and the vision behind ScoutQuest, along with lots of other folks here at M&R, including Matt Derby, another senior vice president here in M&R in our digital ads area, who's actually not on yet because he's on a train platform, but he swears he's going to get here. So I guess he's on a quest to join the webinar. We're also joined by Adam Williams, who is the director of online systems for the League of Conservation Voters, the RAD organization I was mentioning. He's on their data and operations team, but he's done time in their membership and email program as well. And this probably sounds familiar to a lot of us on this call. He drinks a lot of coffee and spends way too much thinking about inbox placement and data hygiene and broken data syncs and other cool stuff that we all like. We're supported today by Laura Clavon and Julia Allenby here from M&R, who are taking care of things behind the scenes. And then we also have two expert question answerers, Sammy Stewart on our data and analytics team, and Michael Ward, my partner here at M&R. They're going to be answering your questions in the Q&A. So you can ask those while we are presenting. So first, though, before we get started, a little bit about M&R. We are, as you may know, people who really spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to get somebody to do something about the world around them and engage in our causes. We've been doing this for about 30 years, and we work exclusively with nonprofits like a lot of you on this call who are fighting for a just and sustainable world. We're pretty much always hiring, just FYI, in case anyone's on this call fishing on a quest for a new job. We're pretty much always hiring. We have had the privilege of working with lots and lots of organizations through the years. There's a couple, some of whom are here on this screen. These are real organizations with real problems, very similar to problems that you are likely grappling with. The challenges of raising money and raising hell and doing good in this really hard world of ours. And as serious as we are about our work, we are equally serious about our puns, which brings me to question time. And you get to answer these occasional trivia questions in the chat. And apparently there's a website called djintelligence.com. And what was the most requested song in 2021 as reported by US DJs? Go ahead and answer in the chat. You're not going to get it. Trust me, you're just not going to get it. I can't even see in the chat if anyone has gotten it or not because I can't look at the chat, but all right. Anyone else have an answer? Come on, come up with one. All right. It's Whitney Houston's I Want to Dance with Somebody, right? Right? Who would have thought? Anyway, an eternal favorite song. All right, so now let's actually dig into the work with Johnny.
Hello. So kind of first off, what is ScoutQuest? It's our data co-op. We started it a few years ago. The story behind it is we're starting to notice a lot of our clients having similar problems around deliverability, and then in particular having large inactive files on their email lists. You know, people who they technically were allowed to email but weren't emailing because they hadn't opened or clicked or engaged on an email in long enough. And so to save on deliverability, they held those people out. So early on when we experimented with this, we were really just trying to partner up a few organizations to share information back and forth with each other over individuals who are on all the organizations' lists, so they could use that information for better targeting. Over years and years and years, or not years and years, but over a few years, we've really developed that. We've gotten a lot more organizations involved. We're pulling in donor histories, action information, and more. And now we're also building it to build, using that data to build lookalike models for advertising purposes as well. And the results have been really awesome. So we've now kind of are opening it up and allowing groups that aren't directly our clients to participate as well. What makes ScoutQuest a bit different from other co-ops out there? Co-ops aren't new, and often in most of the world in co-ops, the goal is to really get access to other groups' lists and to facilitate list sharing, so that one group can send mail or sometimes email to another group's donor list and vice versa. One big barrier that we have, or that we've seen with groups taking parts in those types of co-ops, is that people don't want to share their donor lists with other groups, and rightfully so. So that's really what makes ScoutQuest stand apart, is that you don't share your donors with other organizations. This is really about everyone sharing their information together, so that everyone can have more detailed information on the people that were already on their file, so that they can reach them. And that how we can use that data to the best of our ability for both kind of targeting in email and in advertising as well. And the results have been really great. So just in kind of our first year doing this, we had a organization that was able to reactivate a lot of people on their file through clicking at a cost that came out to about $1.75 after they were able to get all those clickers back, and a much lower cost, about 17 cents per opener, that they were able to get back on. We had another group that was able to kind of do their co-op right in advance of end of year, and they did the reactivation work, and because of that, they were able to get more than 600 donations from people who then immediately turned around and ended up giving during their end of year campaign. We had another organization that used our ScoutQuest advertising audiences. And this was kind of common among many of the groups that are using these audiences. They were frequently the highest performing audiences among many of the groups that were being targeted. This specific group had a 90% higher return on ad spend than their normal prospecting audiences that they were going after. And then finally, another group that was able to reactivate more than 50,000 subscribers through continually engaging in the co-op. All right, so to get involved, just kind of mapping out what the process looks like a little bit. The first step is to let us know that you're interested, and you can do that at quest.mrss.com, or you can just email us. We will kind of loop back with you and share a kind of the details on participation, some of which I will go through in this webinar, as well as a kind of more like contractee agreement type thing that you'll need to sign off on. The timeline for that decision to participate is September 12th. And then once you are signed on to participate, we will ask you to submit a kind of standardized data template that everybody in the co-op also shares. That data is due by the end of September, September 30th. After which we will then, on the M&R side, crunch all the data together, run all the overlaps, normalize everything, and then get back to you with summaries for how your file kind of overlaps with other groups in the co-op. You're then left with a decision on, we've provided you the summary information. You can then choose which data you'd like to purchase. So we sell the data to you at kind of a per record basis. And you can also choose to take part in an optional advertising component of the co-op. And then by November 16th, you'll have all the data back once you've made that decision. So kind of just in time for Giving Tuesday and end of year and everything you need to do for the biggest fundraising moment of the year. Just in time for year end. Yeah.
Johnny, I think that you would want me to repeat this one date, which is the date of September 12th, which is that's the agreements time. And sometimes organizations take a minute for that. So that's one where you don't want to wait till September 11th. You want to get that going before September 11th so that we are ready on September 12th. All right, so before we dig into what some of the new features are, we have one more question time. You can answer in the chat of the following kinds of paper, which is the opacest. You all should get this. Half of you work in direct mail too. Please, like, you should know what your most opaque papers are. All right, a little more time in the chat. Don't be shy. That's right, it's cardstock. Ta-da. And if you guessed correctly, which I hope you all did, I can't see the chat, so I hope you all guessed correctly. Johnny, let's talk about how much it costs.
Okay, so I mentioned the data that you get back will provide a summary of kind of all the records that matched and kind of what types of records matched. You are then left with the decision on how much you would like to purchase. And we have kind of different pricing options among the data. So you can just kind of buy everything at 3 cents a record if you want to purchase everything that matched. That is in terms of how it's worked out in past rounds of Scout Quest. Often just getting everything is the best option. It's like the best per record rate. However, if you just want to go after certain more targeted groups, we have a different rate for kind of the more specialized audiences. So for example, if you wanted to only purchase people who are clicking on emails for other organizations, but are not clicking on your list, we can give that to you at 15 cents a record. So that's like prime audience for if you're doing email reactivation efforts. You want to get people who are, maybe you're not emailing now, but you know we can confirm for you for a fact that they are using email for other organizations. Another category that some groups are interested in purchasing is they want to get more data back on their own donors so they can kind of just enhance their own background that they have on those people. So if you want to purchase kind of a data set on just your own donors, that is also 15 cents per record. And then another example is if you want to purchase data on people who are on your file and may or may not be donors to your organization, but are donors to other organizations, you can also get that at 15 cents a record. So basically that is kind of prime audience for figuring out, again, who might be inactive on your file or at least sitting in kind of a prospecting universe. We can kind of confirm for you that those people are giving and at what level they're giving at for other groups.
And fresh from the train platform, Matt Derby is here. Yay.
Hi, hello. Yes, I'm very sorry that I missed the beginning, but happy to be here. Yeah, and so in addition to the data itself, we also offer an advertising option. And so just to be clear, right, if you have your own audiences that you're receiving the data on, you're welcome to include those in your custom audiences however you like. And I think we have some options. We'll walk through some of the things that we have seen work before or suggest for those. But on top of that, we also are offering access to lookalike audiences built off of the combined files, which, right, these are anonymized, so you don't get the actual data on people who aren't on your file, but we build a set of lookalike audiences that are based on engaged supporters, donors, monthly donors, high value donors. And so those use the co-op data as seed lists to, right now in Facebook, create larger audiences. So I believe we've made both the 2 million audience size as well as 5 million to then be able to advertise for prospecting. So finding people who are not on your list and being able to put ads in front of them. We're also doing sector specific versions of those audiences, assuming that there's enough organizations that's relevant. So for instance, in the past, we've had environmental monthly donors as an option for lookalikes. And as a reminder, yes, and that's the tier for that is $9,500 for access, and so there's not a per unit cost for that.
Much like for those of you who participate in our benchmark study or who read our benchmark study, you'll see that then when we have a rich cohort, we have rich data. So we really always want to really encourage folks in all of the cohorts to participate because it makes the data richer for all of us, and that's always really exciting. a quick reminder that you can ask questions in the chat, but we do have the Q&A feature where we have our expert question answerers, Sammy Stewart and Michael Ward answering those questions. But you can ask in the chat too, but they're on it on the Q&A. So, all right. What's new, Johnny?
All right, so exciting. I think there's some people I can tell just from the attendee list. There are some people who have participated in the past. So I wanted to call out some stuff that could be exciting and new. I think this will be exciting and new to everybody, but particularly if you participated in the past, you wouldn't have gotten this last time around, and you will get it this time. So for the first time, we're going to be pulling in advocacy data into the co-op. So, in the past, people have really kind of focused on email clicker history and donor information. Now we'll also be able to share with you if someone is taking action for other organizations, and how many organizations they're taking action for.
Yeah, and in addition to what I just mentioned about the lookalike models, in the past we sort of said, okay, here are what we think are the most valuable lookalike options for you. Now anyone who's participating in that can also request additional customized lookalike audiences based on whatever data from the co-op you think is actually most valuable to you. So, for instance, if you wanted to restrict it to a certain region of the country, a combination that we haven't done before, like monthly donors and action takers, you can add to what we'll both send you what we've already believe is some of the higher value options, plus can put together up to 2 of those customized versions as well.
We're also going to be offering kind of in our purchasing options. I went through kind of like the 3-cent option and the 15-cent option if you want to just purchase everything, or if you want to have a specific kind of donor select. But we wanted to kind of, similar to what Matt was just describing for the advertising, we wanted to open up the kind of flexibility in what you're allowed to purchase. So we now are offering a custom data purchase option, which is at 25 cents per record. But really, you can ask for anything as long as we have the data to do it. We will match it back and put it back to you. That comes with a minimum purchase of $5,000. But with this example, you could with this option, you could, for example, purchase. I want to only purchase people who are monthly donors to other organizations, or I only want to purchase people who have an HPC of above $50 who are in the co-op.
And just a reminder, this is a lot of data coming at you. We do have a website that we'll put in the chat that has a lot of this data as well. We will be sending the recording out. And I do want to encourage you once again to ask questions. These are all a lot of heady numbers that we're throwing out pretty fast.
The other thing is, so when you purchase data, you will get the subscriber file that you purchased from us, and kind of the name, first name, email address information that you provided originally. And then we're going to be providing a bunch of flags on that record that give you the data back. We are going to have some new information coming back at you this time around. The first one is we will be providing a flag for if someone on your file, if we have identified that they are using an email address actively for another organization that is different from the one that you provided. We will not provide you the email address because, again, we're trying to kind of strictly follow the rules that we set out, that we're not kind of passing donor lists back and forth. But you could use this information to know, okay, this person maybe is inactive for us, but they're not inactive because they don't like us. They're just inactive because they stopped using that email address. We're also providing some donor loyalty flags. So a kind of indicator for if someone is making repeat gifts to other organizations. So not just like a one and done and emergency donor, but if they are coming back again and again for other groups, we're going to provide an indicator for that. We're also providing a couple of indicators to help highlight if someone may be uniquely kind of tied to your mission. One of those is we would provide a flag if someone is a donor to you, but no other groups in the co-op. So they're kind of a unique donor for you. That might kind of highlight them for some special outreach. We're also going to provide a flag for if someone might be a donor to many groups in the co-op, but their biggest gifts are to you, which may also indicate that they are particularly loyal to you.
So nice to tell a board like this group of people is only loyal to us, or the loyalist to us.
And then finally, if you're a previous participant, there are some discounts to kind of have in mind. One is if you're participating for a second time and you already have a file that you've matched and purchased out of Scout Quest, and you just want to refresh that data. You want to see what the newest information on the clicking information, or get a new set of donor information, or you want to get advocacy information because we're just providing that for the first time now. If you have given us permission to store what you purchased before, you can do a refresh of the data that you already submitted at half cost. In addition to that, if any organization spending above $30,000 on data will get a 2/3 discount for anything that goes above that. So kind of beyond that $30,000 mark. So the thing I wanted to call out here, because this was true in the past, that discount was in place in the past as well. We count towards that threshold any purchase you made earlier this year as well. So just keep that in mind if you are one of those groups that made a bigger purchase earlier this year, that you might be kind of already at that threshold or working your way towards that threshold.
If you're like me, then your head is spinning with the things that you might do with this, because one of the things that Johnny said that I want to highlight is that, do you have an idea for another kind of information that you might like? Please let us know. Like, that's the sort of thing that we really like to explore. And if it's a great idea, maybe we roll it out as a feature in the future, or we're able to do a lot with this data and still do it in a way that protects privacy. And that's what's really exciting about it. And we're sure that you have lots of ideas of how you might want to tweak and learn more about your audience with some of the flags that we haven't thought of yet. So right on.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, the advocacy, adding advocacy data into the co-op was directly based on feedback that we received in the last round. Similar with the donor loyalty flags, we had gotten some great ideas from some participating organizations to add that in. And
we're just getting started, y'all. But before we move into talking to Adam about his experience at LCV and Scout Quest, this is my favorite question in the whole, which is the whole presentation, which is, which of the 7 dwarves is the brusquest? Which I didn't even know was a word, and it's hard to actually say out loud, and I encourage you to try saying it out loud. The brusquest. Yeah, you all know this. Please put them in the chat. Please don't be shy. I'm going to wait till there's a few more in the chat before I move on. So you might as well just go ahead and answer. Thank you. One more. Come on. One more person guess. Okay. Yes, it's obviously grumpy. It's grumpy. It's obviously grumpy, which Adam Williams is anything but. Adam, tell us about your experience.
Thanks, Madeline. So I'm Adam. Like they've all said, I work at the League of Conservation Voters. That's LCV. And I work on our data team, and I work with our email team to manage our deliverability. So we're actually one of the aforementioned early adopters that Jonathan talked about. We've done this Quest co-op more than once. So I'm going to set the stage a little bit. Over the years, we built a pretty robust online program that relied heavily on email for fundraising success. So going back about 5 years, right, when email looked very different than it does now, we had an email list of well over 1 million people. We were seeing significant year-over-year growth in both the number of people we were reaching and in our fundraising results for several years in a row. But then, we ran into some trouble, right? We went through an email system migration to get onto a new sending platform, and we ran into some problems during our IP warm-up. So we were flagged by Spamhaus, we had some issues with inbox placement, and we stopped being able to reliably get our messages in front of people. Over time, we were able to claw back our reputation. We were able to get back into good graces with all of these email providers, but it took some drastic action. So in order to ensure that we're getting into inboxes, one of the things that we did was we started filtering out people who weren't opening, clicking, taking action, donating out of our sort of day-to-day active email universe, right? So our engagement rates went way up. We were only emailing our best people, and email providers were much happier with what we were doing. And really our inbox placement has been consistently pretty high since then. But over time, what started to happen was our active file kept shrinking bit by bit, and our inactive file kept growing. And so we were kind of left wondering, are we unintentionally suppressing supporters who might still be reachable? Or are there people in this inactive segment who might who might look inactive, who we might have stopped emailing regularly at some point, but who aren't actually dead weight. So we joined the first version of this co-op with M&R early on, before it was called Quest. And we were able to identify in that first round over 600,000 people from that old huge list who weren't currently active for us, but who were active for other groups. So we knew that those people weren't lifeless, dead emails. They might not be total dead weight. So what we did, we took a small sample of that file from the co-op. I think it was about 1,000 people. And we sent them just a test email to see how they responded, right? So we were thinking we would send them emails with high click-through rates, something really engaging, our best advocacy messages. And this was key. We started small, that really small sample, so that we weren't putting our deliverability at risk again, emailing 600,000 new people at once. So the sample send engagement looked pretty good. From there, we sort of used that performance data that we were looking at to determine how engaged this inactive segment of the list was going to be. And then we segmented the rest of it into smaller chunks. So every day, we could send an email to one chunk. We're never emailing a large inactive list all at once, but over time, everybody on the file that we were targeting would eventually get something. And now this was important too, because of the way that we built our active email audience. As people engaged with those emails, the signs of activity that we use to filter, opening email, clicking, taking action, donating, those people automatically fell back into our active universe and into our regular messaging. So we made it all the way through that first segmented list. We had to decide what to do next. So what we decided to do was take an additional pass through some potentially higher value sections so that we could use that data more than once. So we isolated individuals who engaged on email from multiple other organizations rather than just one other organization, because those people looked the most active, right? And we also isolated people who were donors for other organizations because they looked like potentially the highest value. We resegmented those two groups the same way we had the first time, and we sent an extra round of messaging through them. Now, the last thing that we did was we also used this data to expand our efforts through other channels. So even before all of this happened, we were already using Facebook ads to attempt to reach donors who were inactive for us on email. And those audiences were typically really small, but they have a super strong ROI because they already have an affinity to us. But we used the co-op data to expand our ads audiences by including people who were donors to other groups, and just built a much larger targeting universe for ads. So the end result, it's been 2 years since we first participated in this. The people who we were able to identify who are active for other groups at that time, but were not active for us at the time, have gone on to donate over $200,000 to us. So, obviously we've had a lot of success with this data, and we were happy enough to participate again the year afterwards.
Right on, Adam. Thank you so much. You're going to have a chance to ask Adam all sorts of questions later. He pledges truth, I believe. And one thing that I love about our community is that when we ask people to share what's going on in their organization, in their data, in their world, we always find people who are up for sharing. And that's such a great thing, and really appreciate that, Adam, that sharing such very specific information is really helpful for everyone on this call and all the work we're trying to do. But now, question time. I don't know how you'll know the answer to this unless you Google it, but maybe you know about this, which is what do Eve Jobs, Jessica Springsteen, Jennifer Gates, and Georgina Bloomberg have in common? Go ahead. I'll wait. I don't know. How would you know this? I guess if you are Googling words that have the word quest in them, that's how you would just look at a list of those words. Anyone know? Anyone? You can. All right. There's some answers in the chat. They are all world-class equestrians. And apparently Jessica Springsteen won a silver medal as part of the US team in the 2020 Summer Olympics. Who knew? Who knew? Apparently our marketing team knew because they put together these questions. And And now a picture of ponies before we move into our next slide about, we're going to dig into our advertising. But let's just enjoy those ponies for just a minute, right? Kind of soothing, seeing them run across the stage, screen. All right, Matt, take us away.
Thanks. I want to know if all those people are related to the people who, the celebrities who they have names similar to. But I
Right,
guess
are
I'll
they?
ask that.
I
Maybe
bet
that's
we
a
know
big
the answer.
question thing. Excellent. So yeah, want to dive a little bit deeper into some approaches that we've talked about and seen with advertising. And I think there's two different ways to approach this, right? Like I mentioned, there's both using the data that you can get for your own file and how that can inform your advertising program, and then there's additional lookalike options. And so, if you had spent any time at a conference talking about digital, especially digital advertising, or you go on, Adweek or any other news site having to do with advertising, what you're going to hear a lot about is how the cookie apocalypse, right? And just as a quick refresher, right? Cookies are the tech. That's how we track people across the internet, right? My favorite fact about them is that they were named to convince you not to get rid of them because they sound delicious. So why would you delete your cookies? And that that's how, for instance, if you're going to Zappos and you find a pair of shoes you really like and you put in your cart, but then you change your mind, those shoes will then follow you around on Instagram and the New York Times cooking site or whatever. And so when cookies do finally go away, and this has gotten pushed back a little bit, but at some but slowly but surely browsers are continuing to adopt to eliminate cookies, and over time they will go away. It's going to get harder to identify people, and to, especially with advertising, to be able to match them to their previous interactions with you, unless what you have is unique identifiers like their email address that are mapped into platforms like Google or Meta, and continue to then be able to see and to serve ads that are both targeted to people based on their previous behavior and have content relevant to that behavior. So, in other words, the more you know about your first party audiences, the more useful your ads are going to be. And I think that is a lot of what we're trying to make sure we get at with Scout Quest. So, I think a few approaches that we've talked about, right? So if you know that you have a segment of people on your email file who in your CRM who are donors to other organizations, making sure that you have additional attention with targeted ad buys to them, especially at key moments, can really ensure that stands out, right? You can also boost to repeat donors to other groups, content that especially is tied to your own organizational identity, to really try to stand out among people who have shown that they are loyal to organizations that have a connection with them. And then as well, right, making sure that you can get people who are lapsed or maybe are any not responding to your emails, to try to get in touch with them in another channel that maybe they're more responsive for, so reactivating them. And then of course, right, like trying to take advantage of lookalike audiences. And so just as a reminder, the way that a lookalike audience works is that you can start with any sort of input segment. On the next slide. On the list. And so if you start with a relatively small segment, then any platform, right? Facebook uses lookalike, but for instance, Google can use similar to audiences, and they will create a group of people that look just like that smaller group. And so being able to have a really highly valuable segment of your file turns into a really highly valuable lookalike. And the more high value smaller segments you get, the more high value lookalikes you have the option of testing out against each other. So for sure, right, that's sort of the idea behind how we believe that the premium version is going to give you access to a bunch of different lookalikes that honestly don't overlap with each other. So Facebook, for instance, allows us to build these lookalikes and then see how similar they are to each other. So when, for instance, in spring, we built a lookalike based on wildlife donors, we then compared that to other lookalikes that we had. And so right when we built a lookalike on just monthly donors for a lookalike, they were slightly different, but you can see there's a relatively large overlap between them. That might make sense. But and then when we looked on high value donors, that actually had a relatively small overlap with both of the other two segments. So there's a couple of things that you can do with this. You can decide, you know what, I want, you know, we're already advertising to a lookalike of our donors. We've honestly been advertising to it for years. And so what we really want to do is just expand. We want a new lookalike that we haven't done before. That's an option. Another is, you know, what we really want to do is we want to get really, really targeted. We want to reduce how much we're spending, and we want to get into that segment of people who are in both lookalikes. That's also an option. So there's a lot of different permutations of the different models that you can combine into different ways of targeting and suppressing that can create a whole lot of new options that can really expand, or either expand or make more precise your advertising approach.
You had no notes. I have no idea if you've said everything.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, just one other, you know, we did also compare between sectors. We have seen that, you know, even more than what you saw with the different environmental or versus wildlife, the different segments within each other. So what a high value donor looks like versus a monthly donor, there is some difference. The sector differences in lookalikes is really stark. In fact, there's sometimes as few as 5 to 15% of people in that overlap group. So they really tend to be unique to each other. So I do think that that's why we sort of wanted to have this approach of custom lookalikes, where, you know, if you for instance consider yourself a wildlife group, really making sure that that's what you want to look at, because, you know, what you were doing before maybe wasn't performing as well, as opposed to sometimes, you know, honest organizations consider some both. So you might want actually like more than one segment to test against each other.
One of the things that I like most about this is that it's all of what we do with Scout Quest is based on behavior. It's not based on some sort of idea that somebody has about a person and what they're like and what they're interested in. This is all based on behavior, and that is really important as we move to, as direct response fundraisers, we move into just a more ethical approach to fundraising. It allows us to not stereotype people based on a bunch of indicators that aren't around behavior. So it's a really exciting approach. Speaking of exciting, it's question time one more time before we go into our Q&A with our panelists. Which of the following public servants would be most likely to hold an inquest? Of course you know the answer to this. Of course you do. Please feel free to put it in the chat and be first to put the correct answer. I can't see the chat, so I'm assuming you're putting them in the chat. And if you're not, humor us. Put the answers in the chat. For those of you who guessed a coroner, you are correct. It is a coroner. And I'm not certain why we have that picture, but I like it. We're moving into question and answer with the panelists. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. We can look at the panelists here, and then we have a couple of business to take care of with some dates and some follow-up and how to get into things. But first, let's dig into some questions. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and have you raise your hands. I think, is that the best way to do it? I think it is. And I do have some questions already queued up that have already been asked. So I'm going to start with those. And then folks that have questions, I will do my best to see you. Or you can say something in the chat and I will answer them there. Yeah, ask them in the chat. Laura, our marketing person, says you have to ask them in the chat. But I do have a couple of queued up ones. The first is, hearing about all of the iOS privacy changes that happened last year. How was the co-op adapted to that? And I know Johnny and Matt, you can both talk to that. Adam, you probably can too.
I'll go first because I think there's like an email component to this, and then there's an advertising component to it. On the email side, you've probably seen open rates kind of shoot through the roof in the last year or so since Apple changed their tracking, and basically like if you're using an iOS device with this change, you're basically auto opening all of your emails. So open rate essentially becomes a useless metric now as an indicator if someone actually opened an email or not. So what we did when in the early days of ScoutQuest, we were using a lot of open data in what we were collecting, and we don't do that anymore. Now we're relying on click data. So someone actually has to have clicked on a link to be indicated as a engaged on someone else's email program. So that was a big change that we made in the last year or so once that Apple change rolled in.
Matt, do you want to add anything about ads?
Yeah, and the iOS changes, while they've had a really big impact on Facebook and its performance, I think it has not necessarily had an impact on how either lookalike audiences are made or function. But I will say, I think it's we are continuing to explore advertising options in other platforms, specifically because of how because Facebook has seen a lot of the optimization challenges that have come from iOS changes in particular. So while we don't have those other platforms quite identified yet, I think we might start piloting them in the fall.
I've got a question in the chat from Helen Lucy. Thanks for asking a question, Helen. Adam, did you run into any deliverability issues as you were scaling up sending to the ScoutQuest file names? And how large were your daily segments?
Yeah, if I recall correctly, our daily segments ended up being, I hope I'm not way off with this, but if I recall correctly, they ended up being 15,000 or so, and at the time we were emailing a couple 100,000 people a day. So it was like a drop in the bucket. I don't recall running into any major deliverability issues. And I mean, we're constantly sort of adjusting our audience targeting in response to what we're seeing from different domains anyway. So I'm sure that we made small fluctuations here and there, but nothing large scale enough to stand out in my memory, no.
And Adam, you had mentioned as well, like you did multiple passes. So you had a bucket of people who were just like everybody that was opening for other groups. And then you had another bucket of people who were like opening for more groups that had higher open rates. And generally, if the engagement is higher, it's safer to send to them at a higher scale. So my memory is that depending on the segment, you went higher or lower with the targeting in a given day, but 15,000 matches what I remember too.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mentioned open data a couple times because of, 2 years ago, that was fine to use. It's obviously not the best practice anymore, but 2 years ago, when that was a good metric for email providers to look at, the open rates on all of these segments were pretty strong. So.
So we reactivated a bunch of folks for lots of different organizations through ScoutQuest, and certainly for you, Adam. And so I have a question around the fact that people being people, just because they get back on your list or get back active doesn't mean they stay active. How many have you found that names that you reactivated have stayed active? And that, Johnny, I think this is a question across the participants, but also Adam, maybe particularly for you.
I don't have a number for that offhand. We did find when we went back to the co-op the year afterwards that some people fell into the audience again. People, like you said, people will be people, and they don't, just reactivating them once is not a permanent solution. We did find that some of them were available to be reactivated again afterwards, right? So I don't have the exact number of what % are still active 2 years later. It's something that I can certainly look into. Johnny, I don't know if you know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't remember. I know that in looking at the impacts of running multiple co-ops, yeah, we definitely kind of reactivated some of the same people more than once and got donations from them more than once. It was worth doing.
I mean, of course, because the work is only partly about reactivating it. As it turns out, we all have to run really good programs that keep people engaged and inspired. I know the indignity of it all. We have so much work to do. All right, here's a question, a provocative question that came in through the Q&A. why are you doing Facebook lookalikes when we all know that Facebook is bad and evil?
Matt, do you want to take that one?
That's a great question. You know, I think well, I tend to see the world in grays rather than absolutes. You know, whether I certainly disagree with a lot of what Facebook does, and wish that it would do a lot better in a lot of the world. But the fact is that that's also where people are, which is, I think, the same thing that I would say about YouTube. It's also the same thing that I would say about Google. It's probably, I have not looked recently into what MSN is up to politically, but I'm sure it's also similar. And I think that certainly nonprofits have a question to ask themselves about whether they participate in those spaces, because that's where people are. And for as long as people are there, I think it is admirable for organizations to meet supporters and to both, you know, not, and again, it's not just about donations. I think getting donations does matter, but I also think seeding entirely those spaces is also not what I would suggest doing. So I think you have to be really careful, and you have to draw really clear lines about how you approach what data you share with the tech companies. I don't entirely trust them. But again, I think that's part of why we created Scout Quest in the way we did, is not to feed a bunch of data that doesn't already exist to people who don't already have it. It's just combining it in a way that provides more information to you, the organizations, to take advantage of the tools that exist to reach the audiences that are there. That would be my best option to answer for it.
It's a little bit like when we talk to environmental organizations who are sending mail. It's, you've got to send mail to meet the people where they're at, and if that's where they're at, that's where we meet them as well. So, but we all make hard decisions like that every day. Appreciate that response, Matt.
I would also add, just to make a point. So right now, Scout Quest includes, like, if you sign up for the advertising tier, you get access to advertising on Facebook for those advertising models. And the reason we only do Facebook is not because we went and said, yeah, well, let's only do Facebook. It's because Facebook happens to have like the technical pieces in place that allow us to share the audiences with you. Whereas Google's offerings just like didn't have the pieces in place to allow us to do that. And if they did it, we'd offer it. And so we're continuing to look at what their offerings are. And hopefully in the next round or the round after, we'll have figured out a way to make it work that way.
We've gotten a couple questions just about pricing, because we went through the pricing slides quite quick. It's hard, that's some heady math. I did want to give one email address, scoutquest@mrss.com. And maybe Laura or Julia, if you can put that in the chat, that would be really helpful. Just so that if you have questions, and honestly, like, no pressure. I mean, we're except for maybe me, we're just not those guys. Like, we'll be happy to answer your questions and just really try and explore this with you. Marty, funny in the chat. Please check out the chat for the comedian over there. Do we have other, and we do try to answer these questions on the website as well, but if you need to send us an email to talk through it, please do. We're happy to do that. Anybody have any more questions? Any more questions? Okay, I'm just going to share my screen again. Oh, here we go. Seth, Merritt. What are the required fields? Would you accept donor data with physical but not email addresses? Would it even work?
I'm trying to think through how to answer that question.
Johnny definitely has his thinking face on.
I think you need to have the email address with it.
Yeah. And also, we do have folks in the back, so if Sammy or Michael, you have any other thoughts on that, please feel free to weigh in our little Slack channel. Related to that, from Brandon Robinette, could we pre-hash emails before sending? I could see that would be comforting to their data privacy and legal teams.
I think we might need to get back to you on that one. There may be a way to make that work. We have not done that in the past. It maybe seems possible though.
Brandon, can you shoot Johnny or shoot that email address, that question again, just so we make sure we get back to you on that? By the way, this is recorded, including all of the questions, et cetera, and we do our best to answer those. So when we get back to you tomorrow with the recording, we'll have a lot of these answers in them as well. Other questions? Any final questions? We still have about 2 minutes or so before we need to move on, but any other questions? Right on. Okay, share screen. There's a private conversation happening over there in the chat, I see. Okay. All right, well, we have one last question for you before we talk about some details, which is name the movie with conquest in the title. It spent the week of July 2nd, 1972. How many of you were alive then? As the #1 movie in the US, taking in $4.4 million. Oh, that's so cute. The #1 movie. Anyone know it? Hardly anyone knows this. I'm gonna give you another second. All right. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, right? I didn't even know that was a movie.
I think that counts.
And
for
I
Danny.
was 7 years old in 1972, because I'm ancient. Right on. All right. I want to just go over some key dates. One, the confirming participation and getting agreements done is September 12th. Do not wait till September 10th to do this. This can sometimes be, there is a decision to be made and there is a signing of agreements, et cetera. And sometimes that can take some time. And we are nice, flexible people, but it gets really hard when people push those deadlines. Because remember, we're doing this, it's a co-op, which means we all are relying on each other to meet these deadlines. And we are going into year end, so you want to meet those deadlines. Data submissions due on September 30th. October 24th, you get to know what kind of data is out there for you. And then November 2nd is the deadline to decide what you actually want to purchase. And then you get all that data delivered by November 16th. So meanwhile, in those early weeks of November and the last of October, you probably want to be thinking and strategizing about how you want to use that data. We are always game to have that discussion with you. For M&R clients, please feel free to have that with your team, but feel free to reach out to us. This is a discussion. We're all nerds here and we love to talk about this stuff. And if you have an idea of how you want to use the data, we want to hear it because somebody else might want to use that idea as well. And that's what this is all about here in this co-op. Any final questions before we end our webinar today? Well, I have a final question. It's why is Scout Quest the uniquest data co-op in the industry? And the answer is about that personally share. We don't share personally identifiable information between organizations. It's one of the things I'm most proud about. And I think it's one that's really valuable to all of your many, many supporters as well, that this is a direction that we're choosing to go in. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank our panelists. Adam Williams from LCV. Thank you so much, Adam. Thank you for sharing your experience with your organization. We appreciate you. Johnny and Matt, thank you so much for applying your big brains to this and being so game to answer so many questions and figure this out. And thank you everyone who attended, put up with our shtick and our puns, and also your questions really help us make this product better and better. And we really look forward to seeing what you have to say and seeing what your participation brings us this time around. Thank you so much. I think that's it. That's it. One more time in the chat, Laura or Julia, if you can put in the web address and the email address. Remember, this is recorded and we will send it to you tomorrow. Thank you so much and have a really great afternoon or evening, depending on where y'all are living. Bye, everyone.